Hi, I'm Michael Day, teacher, nature photographer, traveler. This video is about visiting Yellowstone National Park, one of the most unique and fascinating locations in the world, I believe. At the end of the video, there is information about how to access my blog and how to contact me. Thanks for watching. I must admit to loving Yellowstone. Like many baby boom families, my first visit to Yellowstone was a road trip in the 1950s, when black bears were still allowed to beg for food from the cars of tourists. Not visiting again until after moving to Laramie 30 years later. My second visit was in 1989, a year after Yellowstone's devastating wildfires. We smelled smoke as far away as Laramie, some 400 miles away. Between 1989 and 2020, I've spent nearly 200 days hiking Yellowstone's seemingly endless trails and exploring and photographing its many features. Yellowstone, our first national park, was created in 1872. Shortly following two exploratory expeditions that captured the nation's imagination. At the time, Yellowstone was described as a place of wonder. It remains a place of wonder. Each time entering the park, I experience a sense of connectedness and excitement, never knowing what I'll encounter next. This video only provides a snapshot of what to expect in Yellowstone National Park. Though the park can be explored in a single day, I advise against it, unless your objective is just to visit a few places and just to observe a few wildlife. North to south, the road stretches over 100 miles. Instead, when arranging to visit Yellowstone, plan to spend at least 2 to 5 days. A few nights inside the park itself. Spend the first night just outside one of the park's 5 entrances, so you can get an early start on your first full day. Personally, I like to stay in Gardner, Montana, in the northwest corner of the park, near the park's original entrance. No matter where you spend the first night, plan to spend 1 to 2 nights in the Upper Geyser Basin. Lots of lodging options, from simple cabins to the famous Old Faithful Hotel. For the 5-night option, add 1 night in the lake area and 1 night in the northern part of the park, perhaps at the rustic and delightful Roosevelt Lodge. No matter if for the day or for a few days, what follows are major hotspots to visit. Here I'm using hotspots generally in its literal sense. And special thanks to my friend Paul for sharing some of his recordings from the park. But first, a few photos of the assortment of astonishing wildlife you are likely to experience in Yellowstone. The longer you stay, the more opportunities you have. The buffalo, or American bison, black bear, grizzly bear, gray wolf, coyote, red fox, American badger, American beaver, river otter, American marten, yellow-bellied marmot, the elk, moose, pronghorn, mule deer, bighorn sheep, the lovely trumpeter swan, American white pelican, Barrel's goldeneye, bald eagle, osprey, Sandhill crane, great gray owl, blue grouse, and the ever-present common raven. Now a brief description of 7 Yellowstone hotspots. Let's begin with a map of Yellowstone National Park. Again, worth keeping in mind is the distance from the north to south gates, roughly 100 miles, and the imprint of the Yellowstone caldera, covering some 30 by 45 miles in area, formed during the last supervolcanic eruption, approximately 630,000 years ago. A reminder, along with the rich smell of sulfur that will soon surround you, that for much of your time in the park, you'll travel and stand upon an active supervolcano, bubbling away just below the surface. Within Yellowstone are more than 10,000 thermal features, including approximately 500 geysers, home to the largest concentration of active geysers in the world. Ideally, your adventure into the park begins bright and early, around sunrise. Good time for seeing wildlife and a great time of day for photography. If you stayed in Gardner, you'll enter Yellowstone through historic Roosevelt Arch. Stop at the ranger station to pay fees, receive a park map, and a newspaper welcoming visitors and updating road and camping conditions. The road distance from Gardner to Mammoth Hot Springs, our first hotspot, is roughly 5 miles. Along the way, you drive through Gardner Canyon, passing the 45th parallel signpost, and a parking turnout for the half-mile walk to the Boiling River, a popular spot for soaking in the warmth of a public access hot spring. As you travel up the road, look for bighorn sheep on the cliffs above and elk munching on grasses and plants along the Gardner River. Mammoth is a quaint, welcoming place with just enough amenities. Interesting visitor center with bookstore and museum. In the bookstore, I encourage the purchase of the latest edition of Yellowstone Resources and Issues Handbook, a handy guide throughout your visit. You'll also find restrooms, a gas station, hotel, restaurant, and a general store with the best ice cream in the park. My favorite is Moose Tracks. This is also park headquarters for the National Park Service. Lounging about, you may also see elk grazing and resting on the grounds, seemingly quite comfortable in the surroundings, but these are not tame pets and should be respected and provided with distance. Ahead are Mammoth's smoking terraces, though actually outside the supervolcano. The awesome power of Yellowstone's rich thermal features await. Like nowhere else in the park, these chalky white terraces are always changing, fed by hot water from Norris Geyser Basin, over 20 miles away. As it flows down the terraces, the water frequently and gradually shifts direction, allowing some parts of the terraces to dry, and others to radiate shades of red and green, orange and brown, vivid colors coming from the travertine algae at home in the warm water. Currently, along the lower terrace, my favorite feature is Pallet Spring, breathtaking colors. Along the upper terrace, I have two favorites, seemingly the more recently active Canary Spring, especially when viewed from the side, and the solitary and majestic Orange Spring Mound. The upper terraces are also popular sites to visit during winter. Next, the road travels south steeply and narrowly uphill, passing the park's Golden Gate, and then on to the first of two lovely meadows. Bunsen Peak is off to the left and Swan Lake off to the right, as well as numerous trails, taking the lucky hiker to majestic peaks and a lovely waterfall. The distance from Mammoth to Norris Geyser Basin, our second hotspot, is 21 miles. Along the way, we cross the Gardner River and pass turnouts for Sheep Eater Cliff, Willow Park, Obsidian Cliff, Roaring Mountain, and lovely Nymph Lake. Norris Geyser Basin is also located outside the caldera, but it won't feel that way. Actually, descending the stairs and trail into Porcelain Basin eerily provides a sense of descending into the caldera itself. Fumaroles and escaping steam, mud pots and splashing mud. It's wonderful. As you walk along the boardwalk, you'll find some beautiful hot springs and geysers, such as the exquisite Emerald Spring, and Echenis Geyser, the largest acid water geyser known, that erupts regularly every 1 to 4 hours. Steamboat Geyser, the world's tallest active geyser, throwing water over 300 feet in the air, is also located at Norris. Steamboat only erupts sporadically, sometimes going years without an eruption, though it did erupt 32 times in 2018 and 45 times in 2019. The road continues south for 30 miles to our next hotspot. The 5 remaining hotspots are all located within the supervolcanic caldera. Our destination is the Upper Geyser Basin and Yellowstone's centerpiece, Old Faithful Geyser. The Upper Geyser Basin is situated in the southwest section of the caldera. Among the sites you'll pass, all worth a stop, are Artist Paint Pots, Gibbon Falls, Firehole Canyon Drive, the Lower Geyser and Midway Geyser Basins, Grand Prismatic Spring, Fairy Falls Trailhead and Biscuit Basin, Gateway to Mystic Falls, one of my favorites. Hopefully a reservation for the night has been made, allowing you to explore the expanse of the Upper Geyser Basin at your leisure, especially providing the opportunity for early morning and late evening walks along the mini boardwalks when crowds have departed. Old Faithful Geyser erupts more frequently and more predictably than any other big geyser in Yellowstone. Average wait time is about 75 minutes, and eruptions may last up to 5 minutes and reach heights of over 100 feet. But there are lots of other sites to visit: thermals along the Firehole River, geysers such as Beehive, Castle, Grand, Grotto, and Riverside, and hot springs such as Morning Glory Pool. This is also a wonderful area to visit during winter. From Upper Geyser Basin to our next hotspot, West Thumb, along Yellowstone Lake, is 17 miles. Again, there are numerous pullouts, such as the one for Kepler Cascades. West Thumb is delightful. Not too big, with lovely thermals, such as Abyss Pool, one of the deepest hot springs in the park, and Bluebell Pool. And the boardwalk extends along Yellowstone Lake, where delightful thermal cones project along water's edge, such as Fishing Cone, where stories tell of fishing for and catching trout in the lake and then cooking the catch in a boiling pool without ever taking it off the line. Next, we travel 21 miles east to the lake area of Yellowstone, situated toward the northeast section of the caldera. Here you'll find the historic and still elegant Yellowstone Hotel, the oldest lodge in the park, and one of my favorite places to stay in the park. The hotel has been in operation since the early 1890s. It has a superb restaurant, reservations recommended, and in the evening provides a perfect setting to unwind, sip a beverage, and listen to live, relaxing music. Yellowstone Lake is the largest high-elevation lake in North America. It is a big lake, roughly 20 miles long and 14 miles wide. I've hiked the shoreline of much of it. Nearby is Fishing Bridge, where you can witness the transformation of this grand lake into its equally famous river. Also nearby are some charming hiking trails, such as Storm Point, where you can experience both the beauty of the lake and the impressive Absaroka mountain range to the east. Our sixth hotspot is Mud Volcano, only a few miles to the north of the lake area, small in size but large in heart. If you have stayed the night in the lake area of the park, you can visit Mud Volcano early in the morning, before too many people arrive. This is one area best experienced for solitude and listening. During one of my first visits to the park, I was with a ranger at Mud Volcano, who suggested the area was sacred to some native peoples, and that, if I listened carefully, at Dragon's Mouth Spring, I could hear the very heartbeat of the park, and perhaps the very heartbeat of the planet. An early visitor to Mud Volcano can also experience an assortment of wildlife. Our 7th and final hotspot is located 12 miles north of Mud Volcano. Along the way, you pass through the Hayden Valley and follow the northern flow of the Yellowstone River. This is wonderful habitat for wildlife. Along the river, look for swans and pelicans. Our destination is the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, located in the upper northeast part of the caldera. Next to Old Faithful Geyser, the second iconic feature of the park is Lower Falls, best viewed from Artist Point. But don't mistake in photographing this wonderful view as all there is to see and do here. I strongly suggest spending some time hiking the canyon rim. Available are around 3 miles of managed trail that lead above the magical canyon walls and descend all the way to where the Yellowstone River begins its canyon voyage. That's our loop, 152 miles from and return to Gardner, Montana. I hope you'll enjoy your time in Yellowstone as much as I have. If you'd like to further examine the link between adult education, wonder, curiosity, adventure, and travel, visit my blog at michael-day.org, where you can also contact me. Happy travels.